do in the winter.
Hello and welcome to this, the third in a series of podcasts from the island of Mull. Today I'm talking to Nick Turnbull. Nick, originally from Edinburgh, came to the Isle of Mull in the 1970s to start fishing lobsters. And he's fished all sorts of different things, as you'll hear, but eventually in the 90s he developed an oyster farm near Croig, at the north end of the island, past Dervig, not far from where we live. In this conversation we talk about many different things, including the history of his life fishing here, the little bit about his family life. There's a really good ghost story in there as well. I recorded this podcast on Sunday over at Nick's house, and I've edited it on the ferry trip to Barra, where I've been working. So I've been from Mull to Barra over the course of the last couple of days, worked in Barra, and I'm now sitting in the car queue waiting to go back to Mull from Barra, having just finished editing the podcast on the ferry. And my head's mince, so please excuse me if I'm talking waffle. This podcast has been sponsored by the Island Bakery again, so thank you very much to the Island Bakery for their support. You can follow them on social media, and you can also visit them at islandbakery.co.uk. There's a strange little beeping noise. I'm not sure what that is. I'm really sorry. Anyway, I'm going to hand you over now to Nick. Thank you very much. Nick. Can I ask, who are you?
Yeah, interesting starting question. Who am I? Yeah, well, I mean, I am who I am now, but from my background is a middle-class Edinburgh lad whose father was a stockbroker in Edinburgh.
Gosh.
A frustrated stockbroker in Edinburgh who I think looked out the window the whole time to the sea, and within a short time he spent more time on boats than he ever did in his office. He retired early, and he retired to a wee sailing boat, but he always tinkered with fishing boats. He'd always had this notion that he would like to get out and go fishing, and he'd weekends he would go up the east coast to Gardenstown and places like that, as you'd see a boat for sale, and he'd go over this boat, and always with this wee hankering for a fishing boat. But he'd spent too many years being a businessman in Edinburgh really to do anything seriously. However, I suppose some of that must have brushed off on me, without a shadow of a doubt. I wasn't very successful at school. I went to a school that sort of mass-produced university folk.
University fodder.
For fodder, but not for me. So a brief course in hotel management.
All right.
And a brief couple of years working in a hotel made me decide that this definitely wasn't something I wanted to do in my life. And met up with George, who'd been at my school as well and who'd dropped out of university. George, I actually can't remember what he was doing. I think he was doing maths.
Whoa.
He was very good at maths. We said, right, what are we going to do here? And I said, well, I've always really fancied fishing lobsters. And so we, after a short time, we happened around Mull to find Croig Harbour, which was empty. There were no boats here then. And the wonderful Mrs. Bray, who at that time was trying to repopulate what was left of this decaying estate, really.
What year was that?
That would have been 1970.
Okay.
And no one was really interested in property or land at that time. And she was keen. It's quite a remarkable woman, really, in her own way, because she was keen to see smoke coming out of chimneys again. Very keen to have people living and working here. I'm not sure that she totally realised that dream, because inevitably some folk had taken advantage of her. However, £50 plot.
Oh.
And a pile of stones.
Gosh.
And so we got somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
And a harbour there.
And literally a pile of stones, though.
A pile of stones, yeah. A pile of rubble with, well, it wasn't rubble actually. There was still the remains of, I'm not sure whether this actual ruin had been a house or whether it had been a byre, but certainly it was a ruin.
And this is where we're sitting right now, your home?
This is exactly where we're sitting right now, and the stones here are the same stones that were rebuilt.
And that was by yourself?
Myself and wee George, and then eventually myself to finish it off, and George got his own property. And at that time there were quite a few people, mainly from London actually, at various it was called the Artists' Corner, or the Artists something, I can't remember exactly what it was, Artists' Corner or Hippies' Corner, because there were a lot from London who'd come up from Hornsey, I think, Hornsey Art College, and were doing sort of similar things, building houses. So there we go. In those days you could just buy a fishing wee boat. You didn't need licenses, you didn't need qualifications, you didn't need any safety requirements. You bought a boat, you made your creels, and you could go fishing. So
how did you learn that? So you're a young man who'd worked in the hotel industry in Edinburgh. How did you go from that to making your own creels? How did you learn?
Interesting. Well, I have to say that the first creels we made, as some of our peers would say, it was a wonder that the lobsters didn't break their neck getting into them. But these guys were great. Big Ian MacDonald, who had been the Elva ferryman, and then got his own lobster boat, the Fair Maid, which incidentally we worked on for one winter at the Sprats. Sprats were you pair trawled for them, so his partner was wee Alistair MacLean, who had the Manx Beauty to start with, and then got a lovely boat built by Nobles of Girvan, famous boat builders in Girvan, and the Aquila was the name of that boat.
Oh yes, there's still an Aquila about now.
And there is, well, he had an Aquila after that. But that boat's still in existence today.
Goodness.
Beautiful boat, varnished boat.
Anyway, wooden
boat,
metal.
yeah, wooden boat. And so we pair trawled one winter with them, which was an interesting experience. The Fair Maid was Fair Maid was the same age, more or less the same age as me, a year younger than me actually, 1949, and really passed her best for doing trawl work or heavy work. It was fine for the lobsters, but
what was the market for sprats at the time? What was that for?
So the sprats that was interesting because the Norwegians, there were two markets. There was a local, not a local, but a British market, and there was a Norwegian market, which was a really good market. So the Norwegians actually sent over two Klondikers. King Frost and Queen Frost, and they alternated while one was away with the frozen sprats to the canning factory in Norway. The other one was here getting the sprats off the boat. So they actually anchored up behind Aorsa
in Loch na Keil.
In Loch na Keil, which was where the bulk of the sprat fishing was going on in that area. So it was really handy. They could catch the sprats and go straight down to the Klondiker and unload them straight onto the Norwegians.
Fantastic.
Got quite an interesting bit of history of that. And of course the Norwegians were very fussy about the quality of the sprats. It had the oil content had to be just right.
How do you measure the oil content of a sprat just coming off a boat?
Well, I'm told that the way they used to do it was they would put them in barrels of brine.
Buoyancy.
Salt. Put them in salt and wait for the brine to get into brine, and then they would drink the brine.
Oh right, they do it by taste.
And they would do it by taste. They knew the fat content.
Oh fuck! What?
And then they would be all fine for everybody to land to them.
Yeah.
I'm not absolutely certain on that part, but
It's a bit of witchcraft there. Yeah.
Sounds like a good. But that was certainly what I was told.
Wow.
And so it was really good, and they had many years good fishing behind down those lochs for sprats, and but the old Fairmaid, well, she would open up when they filled her with sprats, because she was quite lightly built, really. She was built for a different kind of fishing, for herring fishing in Loch Fyne, really.
Oh gosh.
And so when they put the boards across the top of the hold, when she was full, the boards used to fall down because she'd spread some. So it wasn't long before Big Ian got another boat, another similar boat to Alistair's called the Frey, which was also built in Girvan. Lovely boat too. Both of those were beautiful boats, varnished, really good sea boats.
How far out did you go? Did you go sort of out towards Colintyree, or did you go out deeper than that?
No, we went out. We would go quite far, because sometimes the sprats wouldn't be in the lochs. So, and they could fish for herring too if they could catch herring.
Oh, fantastic!
Which is quite an interesting story. It's a digression, really. But
that's fine.
The following year, I think, or the 1 or 2 years after that, we said to the boys, to Alistair and Ian, would they keep us some herring for bait, which they duly did. And they came in one night, and the deal was that we take them to the Mishnish, and them and the crew, and the payment was in drink.
Oh, that's very, very equitable trade.
So, of course, we had to be part of that.
Oh, gosh.
And so the evening went on, and the night went on, and I had the old Land Rover. So we knew we had to make 2 or 3 trips with the herring back to Croydon and salt it down the following morning.
Yeah.
But anyway, time went on in the Mishnish, and time went on, and the drink flowed, and eventually it shut, and George and I got into the Land Rover, set off up the Ace Brae, and it was very icy that night. It was late. It must have been January, I think, or December. It was an icy night, and changed gear going up the Ace Brae, and the back of the Land Rover opened up, and all the herring shot out the back and down the Ace Brae, slid down the Ace Brae.
Oh, yuck.
So
back into the sea?
The story was in the morning that there'd been so many herring in the bay that night that
we tried to swim up the hill.
that they got up the hill in the Ace Brae. Yeah. So that was that part of the fishing. But I mean, that was you'll get much better stories from Alistair. Unfortunately, Big Ian's no longer with us, but he was an amazing man, and they were great. They showed us, going back to your original question, they showed us how to make creels, and particularly Big Ian was really helpful. Him and his crew, and Tommy, Smithy, and Alistair as well.
At what point then did you think, right, I've definitely done the right thing here? Or are you still wondering?
I don't think so. I've always the freedom. The freedom you get on the sea is like a freedom you can't get anywhere else, and that's still. I know that today it's different. There are licenses and rules and regulations, but there's still a freedom when you're out there. You've still got that freedom.
The horizon.
And exactly, the horizon, and that ability to that ability of not actually knowing. You don't know what's happening next. You don't know what's coming next. You don't know what's in the creel that's coming up. Nothing, or full of lobsters, And I think that's probably a huge attraction for most fishermen that are out there. There's always this possibility they're going to hit a jackpot.
Well, Kenny's talked about it. When Kenny and I have chatted in the past, he talks about it as well. It's just, it's more than, it's not a job, it's a vocation, it's part of who you are in some sense, and it's just that you are. Yeah, the boat is, you are part of it. It's just, you're at sea, that's the thing. It was the same for my dad as well, being a wee boy growing up in Colonsay and Skye and elsewhere.
Yeah.
It was always the sea for him, always pootling around, and that when he was 16, that was him off. He was away to train and then way out to the Merchant Navy stuff.
Well, and it just gave you that, the only master there is the sea.
Yeah.
You're not dependent on land.
Yeah.
Land is a nightmare. But the sea is free. As the years went by, it wasn't just lobsters, whatever opportunity that came up. We took, and we were salmon fishing, and of course we would meet on our travels, lobster fishing. We'd meet Pedro, or Peter McLean, as he was properly known, but Pedro, as everybody knew him around here, and he had a vast knowledge of everything to do with the sea and the places and the names of everything between here and certainly between here and Howen. He had this amazing knowledge. He fished at Sorn, and he also fished off Mingary, off the Murchan there, which is
What's the Murchan?
The Murchan is the large kind of rocky island that sits off the mouth of Mingary.
Oh, okay, yeah. Duncan McGilt talked about poaching in the Mingary Burn and saying how brilliant that was.
Yeah, well, he probably mentioned the Murchan, and that's where the salmon net, his salmon net, was held in position there, and then he had one at Sorn. I think he actually had three. He also had one in off a Glengorm somewhere.
How did you fish salmon? Did you use net for salmon, or did you fish?
Yeah, no, we started the salmon the year we were actually going to gill net for salmon, which is a very easy form of fishing salmon. But the year we got the lease at Trestles was the year the gill net ban in Scotland came in. Yeah. So we it would have been the mid-70s, mid to late 70s, I suppose, and so we just fished a bag net, but it was Trestles Head is it was the north side of Trestles Head, but it was such a tide going by there that it was quite a dangerous and difficult place to keep a net. I think the first year we had 700 fish, and the second year we didn't have very many at all, and the fishing was beginning to decline at this stage by the late 70s.
That reminds me of one of your stories that we've talked about previously about Clachguggery as well. Was that when you were fishing down there?
Well, yeah, we'd actually been gathering in the early days. We gathered wood off the shore for the creels, to make the creels, and we'd been down gathering shore, carried it up there, and we're having a piece in one of the ruin, actually, one of the better ruins close to the tree at Clachguggery there, and just sitting having a piece and looking out the window, and this figure passed with a shawl on it, on the head. Went out, had a look, couldn't see anything. I thought it was a bit odd, but I just thought, well, maybe I just imagined it. But I got quite a clear picture of a woman with a shawl on her head, dark shawl. Anyway, I went speaking to Ian Morrison's mother, Mary, and I never mentioned it. I just said, well, we'd been getting wood down at the shore at Clachguggery, and she said, oh, no, I could never go back there again. I'll never go back there again. And I said, oh, why is that? She said, oh, well, I had a bad experience there. And I was sitting in this ruin near the tree there, and this woman passed the gable end window wearing a shawl, and the hairs on my neck just, because I hadn't mentioned anything, and I said, oh, wow, that's interesting because I mean, I didn't have that bad feeling that she had. I just...
It's an observation, just something that's passed.
Yeah, she had a really bad feeling that made her never want to go back there. And she'd got some story about either cholera or smallpox. I think it was smallpox that the village had been, completely lost to smallpox. And that this smallpox in those days, one of the things they used to do was cut off women's hair. I suppose a health reason or whatever reason they did it, and that she was wearing this shawl to cover her head.
Goodness, yeah.
But it is very peculiar, and it is an atmospheric place. But
is that the ruin that's got the ship graffiti in it?
Exactly, same ruin.
Yeah,
it is a very atmospheric ruin.
Oh, but it's also in that low-lying hollow.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I just found the coincidence of that just, hair-raising. I can remember some, not so much the lobsters, but I remember experiences. I remember on our launch coming up the back of the kayak one day, and the rudder pintles that hold the rudder in place pulled out the back of the boat. And
oh God!
And another time at Harran.
How did you get home from that?
Well, we kind of leant over the back of the boat, and the pinto was luckily. I don't know actually whether the pinto had gone. I think it had gone, and we improvised something that got us home that day.
Oh.
And another thing, long before rope cutters came in, it was always a risk, and everybody did it, of getting ropes in their propeller.
Right.
And we were in it behind the Harran Reef actually, with our second boat, which was another wooden boat. Which is a slightly bigger boat, this one 26 foot with a half-decker. We got a rope well and truly in the screw, and it wouldn't come out, and so there was nothing for it. I went over the side of the boat, took my clothes off, jumped over the side of the boat, and we were quite pretty shallow. I mean, my feet weren't on the bottom, but I could see the tangle all round about the boat, and hacked away at it. But I can remember, I can feel the cold on the head. I can feel the cold on the head yet, because you have to put your head under water really to see to cut it off. And that was one
situation to be avoided.
And then another one was at the North Island, and that was in the third boat, the Gangwarley. Again, before we had a rope cutter put on it, and we had a complete fleet wrapped up in our prop. And thankfully Robin Cow pulled us out of that one. Otherwise we'd probably still be there yet. But yeah, I mean, the lobsters, we always made a living at them.
That's great.
And in those days, we would do a lot other things in the winter. We'd make the creels. We'd do building work.
Yeah.
We worked any work that was available. We'd do it. We helped some of the people down here, Kevin Luscombe and Terry, do some of their building work during the winter. It was much more varied now when we were doing it than it is now, where everybody just fishes.
Yeah.
But then there weren't the species then. There was really only lobsters.
Really? Was that because of the nature of the marketplace?
Well, there were no brown crab. There was no brown crab market. There was no velvet crab market. The prawns were just starting. The two bigger boats had been prawn trawling. There was always a market for the prawn tails, and then the market started for the creel crop. So
the prawn tails, would that be for scampi or for...
Yeah, that was the early, yes, exactly, for scampi and
nifrocs.
Yeah,
right.
So they tailed them in those days.
Right.
trawled for them and caught them and tailed them.
Right.
Huge quantities, so the likes of Alistair and Ian would do that in some of the summer months. Do a bit of lobsters, a bit of that, and go at the sprats in the winter. But we obviously didn't have those options in a small boat.
So, closer to home then, how did you come to establish your home life here then? The two boys, the boys' house. And how did you meet Aileen? What happened?
Well, Aileen came here on she was the head teacher at Mournish.
Oh, she took over from Mary Morrison.
She took over from Mary, exactly.
Ah, right.
I think it was 8 girls, 8 pupils, 8 girls.
9 girls, the creme.
And she didn't even know really where Mournish was when she took this job. I mean, fantastic opportunity, but also quite scary for her. No telephone, no. The only people she saw on the day were Sonny McPhail, who delivered the lunches and took the school children there, and Morag, who was the cook. Oh yeah, so it must have been Morag who took Morag to the school where she cooked the meals. So yes, she came and then she met this disreputable, filthy fisherman.
How did you meet? Was it in the mission?
Well, she stayed at the mill.
Ah.
That was her lodging, because obviously when she arrived she didn't have anywhere to stay really.
Yeah.
So the mill, as usual in their generous fashion, took her in.
Yeah.
And in those days Ian was away in the winter on ships.
Yeah.
So there was always a bit of room in the mill then. And so yeah, Colin can remember yet the young lodger that came to stay. There was less distractions, I suppose, in those days.
No skybox, no
skybox,
Netflix,
no TV. I think the TV came to the village sort of from somewhere up the hill, but it seemed to work only infrequently.
Voodoo.
And certainly out here, I mean, we didn't get electricity until the late 70s. There were more people making things for the winter to do in the winter.
Yeah.
Like plays and a lot more caling as well than there is now. I think television has kind of put a bit of an end to that in many ways. But that's only my view.
We still see a lot of folk.
Yeah. Well, it may be an age thing too. As you get a bit older, as you get less people arrive on the scene. I don't know. But going back to those fishing days, it was funny because I'm just remembering now the names of the Malling boats that used to come down here.
Oh yeah, which were they?
There was the Claytonia, that was the Downies,
right.
Peter Downey. There was the Wee Excellent, which is a lovely wee boat. That was somebody Aitchison.
Uh-huh.
And then there was the Isabella. So there were local boats and there were Malling boats, but quite big Malling boats, 40 to 50 feet.
Right.
It wouldn't come down here so much unless the weather was bad, but they were down the west coast of Mull. Mull was always an attraction for lobster fishermen. What
do you think it is? We've talked briefly in the past about Loch Nakeal, and what is it particularly about the prawns in Loch Nakeal?
Yeah, I mean, the lochs are an amazing source of life, marine life. I think it's maybe the combination of the nature of the ground, but also the water that's flowing off the hills there, the fresh water that's bringing down. The
mineral wash off it.
Yeah, I mean the native oysters there are just absolutely amazing. They grow there like they just don't grow anywhere else, especially around Alva there. And even today, whereas most parts of the UK struggle with native oyster populations, around that area, Alva, round about that area, still has strong populations of healthy native oysters. So yeah, and then of course you had the Trestles Islands, which were the home lobsters. You know, I mean, they'd been fished and still are fished heavily every year.
How far is a lobster's territory? Because crabs, I've heard tales of crabs walking from Ireland up the west coast of Scotland.
Yeah, no,
It's mad.
lobsters tend not to move very far.
They've got a wee hole in the
If they've got a good hole. I mean, that seems to be the way they are. The crab on there, the female crab on the other hand, not the male crab. The male crab, they say, doesn't move very far at all. But
Right,
the female crab always moves south, at least where they've released them in Orkney.
Really?
They're always moving south, southwest. They don't know why exactly, but they're travelling hundreds of miles sometimes. And they only think that the reason is that when they release their eggs, the current, you know, the tidal current carries the eggs north. I mean, this is only surmising, but they do know that the female crab is always moving southwest. They've picked them up as far as off the outer isles from Orkney and down as far as off Skye on the west coast here.
Amazing.
And so the boys now are about to start tagging here, which means they should see some interesting results to see if they go south from here. Yeah. But certainly in those days, in the early days, there was no market for crabs. So
right, okay. So where's the market for crab come from? Where's that? Is it Spain? Is it China?
Yeah, it's our EU friends who have created the initial market for both, for really all the species.
No cher camarade.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad news, really.
It's hellish.
But more recently, China has come into play, and very specific female crab of a certain size and quality, and they've really upped the game. So in the last few years, the price of crab finally, after something like 10 or 20 years not having really moved much, has doubled in price. So
gosh, not just caught up with inflation.
No, it's made it now probably. Well, it'd be interesting to see the results, but certainly a major export now for the fishermen from right round the coast. And of course the velvet crab, which is specifically really Spain.
That's for tapas or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, tapas. I mean, they love them over there. But that was a market that I think, you know, we tried virtually every bit of fishing. You know, the lobsters initially, and then we also fished prawns out of Alva Ferry actually for 2 or 3 years. Not for all the year, but for part of the year. And also up at Fascadale we fished for 3 years, I think, up towards Fascadale. The wee gangwar, it was just a bit small really for, I think it was 2.5 hours it used to take us to get up there. Then the velvet fishery started, and we fished out in Col and did really well out there. It's a really steady fishery for, I guess, the best part of 10 years. So I mean that made a huge difference to being able to fish really all the year round. Yeah. Plus the introduction, the modern technology, the wooden creels. You know, nobody makes wooden creels anymore. They're all bought off the shelf steel creels. So, you know, whereas we when we started, we had 100 wooden creels maximum. Well, we didn't when we started. We had 50, I think. But then we progressed to 100, and eventually with our second boat we maybe had 200. But by the time we were, you know, by now, by today's standard, Kenny fishes what, 800 creels, and some of them a lot more than that. You know, the super crabbers are fishing anything up to 3,000 creels.
And it's a sustainable supply. Well,
so far, but you know, that's crab really, and so far they've held up well, but definitely lots of work needs to be done on research work, and you know, we're doing this now. We've got a crab box out here for for the local fishermen. Yeah, those days it was a different style of life. So they could finish hauling the bigger boats could finish hauling their creels probably certainly by early afternoon, and very often the local boats would go into Gometra.
Oh.
They might double haul in the summertime.
Okay.
Half their creels, 100 creels, they might double haul out in the deeper water, but they'd go into Gometra and then the crack would start.
Gometra Harbour is the North Harbour there is amazing.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
that's where they were, in the North Harbour.
Oh, it's just a lovely spot. It's amazing.
So there'd be a lot of joy and jokes. I mean, one of the stories I heard, and we'll leave some names out of it.
Certainly, I can bleep over them if you say them. Don't worry. Yeah.
Was so in those days when you caught the lobsters, you packed them into wooden boxes and floated them.
Right.
So you pack them into your own wooden box, specially made wooden boxes for lobsters. You put exactly 70-pound weight in each box. You stacked them very neatly, and you could put 70 pound in, and then you would put them over. You had a line in the sea with anchors at each end, and you'd tie them onto this line. And of course, in Gometra Harbour, everyone would be watching to see how many boxes each boat put out after their day's catch. And this one particular fisherman, well-known fisherman, who was a very good fisherman, was coming in, and these boxes were being going out by the dozen. And the rest of the fishermen were wondering how on earth they could catch so many lobsters. So when darkness fell, one of them rowed over, opened the lid of one of these boxes, because the lids are actually tied on the string, opened the lids of these boxes, and here he'd filled them with stones. So it was a bit of a good story to tell that they.
36 boxes today, last nothing more than that.
But that was the kind of the kind of crack that kept these guys going. They had
good fun.
Yeah.
You've done crabs, you've done lobster, you've done salmon, you've done prawns.
Yeah.
What led you to the wonderful friend in the shell?
The oysters. So I was telling you that we'd done, when the velvet crab fishery started, we started to make some good money, really steady money, right the way through the year, and but we thought, everything we ever seemed to do seemed to tail off a bit. So we thought, what can we do that
sustainable
would be here, a bit different, and would be here forevermore. And we'd heard about Lochfine oysters, so we thought, well, let's see what we can do here. Yeah. So actually, we employed Andy Abrahams from Colonsay.
Oh yes, yeah.
To come over and supply us with, I think we started with 10,000 oysters. And
what age were they? Were they kind of seed oysters, or were they quite large?
They were about 10 grams, so they're about a year old. And we got backing from HIE, or was it HIDB then? I'm not sure.
Probably.
1990 this was when we started.
Islands Development Board.
Yeah, we certainly got backing to start up, and we got going, and it seemed to grow quite well down there. And of course, it's on our doorstep here down in the loch. Yeah. And got really enthusiastic into the kind of people that were doing it were interesting individuals.
Totally, yeah.
Like Andy Abrams, and quite a few of the estate owners also were. Jamie Howard had a go at it, and so
Nick,
we got
Nick Mawhinney as well.
Nick Mawhinney, yeah. Well, Nick came along a wee bit later, I think.
Right.
But yeah, he's got going on it too. Got all individuals,
Yes.
And anyway, So it seemed to do all right. So the following year we bought another 20-odd thousand, and the following year another 20. And suddenly, by the year 3, they were coming to fruition. And all of a sudden, we had stuff to sell. Only thing was, we couldn't find anywhere to sell them
in
to.
the marketplace yet. Yeah.
So I think those first ones we actually sold to a company up north who were attempting to supply one of the supermarkets. I think it was Waitrose they were attempting to supply.
Oh gosh. Well, that's come full circle then.
Yeah, it has. So so the first wee trailer load went up there, and we thought, oh well, that's that. And then we got an opportunity to join a fledgling cooperative called the Scottish Shellfish Marketing Group. In those days, they were working out of a porta cabin at the back of Loch Fyne. Went and spoke to the manager there, and he said, yes, okay, great.
Fantastic.
And within a short time, I was the director of it, and a shorter time again, I was the vice chairman of it. And it was growing really fast, mainly through mussels, not through through oysters. Although there were an equal number of oyster growers then as to mussel growers.
Where were in Barossa?
In Barossa hadn't actually started at that stage. They must have started late 90s, I would think. Initially they sold privately, and then they joined in with the marketing group. And Douglas now, of course, is vice chairman of the marketing group. So it came from all of us actually. It came out of a necessity to sell, and we were all very much in it together, and all very much at the same level of starting up, and not huge turnovers, small turnovers, and with all the problems that came with all of that. But within a short time, moved out of the porta cabin at Loch Fyne and leased a factory in Bells Hill.
Brilliant.
And with an even shorter time, it looked like it was going to go bust. However, we all pulled together, and it came right. And it now has a £27 million turnover.
That's brilliant.
Employing, I don't know, 50 or 60 people.
And is that from all over the West Coast or all over Scotland?
It's all over Scotland.
Fantastic.
Yeah, all the way from the main suppliers of the mussel growers in Shetland.
Right, okay.
And there are not so many oyster growers now. In fact, there's only 2 oyster growers, but we're still in there.
Yeah.
And it's quite a significant business now.
It's brilliant.
And the cooperative principle is a very good principle, because it does mean that you know, on the face of it, you have a say in how that business is run, and that's quite important. It's a bit like our freedom thing again with the sea. You've got a little bit of freedom to say the direction of how things can go. So I'm a big believer in that kind of
autonomy.
Autonomy, yeah. I know there's a place for private as well, but I think we've proven as being now really the only suppliers to the supermarkets of growing shellfish in Scotland, that this actually does work. So yeah, now it's come from those very small beginnings. We're now have something like 4 million oysters between our own Loch Cuan here, and some over in Loch Creran as well, and a turnover of about 600,000 mature oysters every year.
Which is extraordinary.
And
so most of that goes through the cooperative out into the marketplace. But who are the buyers for these? So Waitrose you mentioned, but are there other who else buys?
There are not so many. The cooperative really deals with the big retailers like Waitrose and Tesco's and Morrison's, The new ones on the block too, Lidl.
Lidl do oysters?
Lidl, yeah.
That's
Lidl.
brilliant.
Well, they only do them on special occasions, but they did them at Christmas time. I mean, a big feather in our cap was Marks and Spencer's.
Yeah.
Which, again, it was only at Christmas, but it was very successful.
Also, the Island Bakery supplied to Marks and Spencer's as well, so there's two Mull businesses, at least two Mull businesses.
Because they're very demanding
that's
as regards, the product and the care of the product.
Certainly bloody well costs enough.
Yeah, but they were very pleased. So last year was the first time that they'd ever dealt in live shellfish before. The Marks and Spencer's tend not to like live things, I suspect. Mm-hmm. So that was a success. And we deal with a few, locally we deal with all the restaurants round and about, and on the mainland not so many really. We don't like to tread on anybody's, there are other oyster growers around the Oban area and we wouldn't tread on their feed. But in the cities there's one or two restaurants, but really the bulk of what the cooperative sells is through the supermarkets, and that suits us fine. We can get a bulk lot away every week.
So the oysters, when they're growing, they are grown on. They start off from seed oysters, which are tiny little things.
Yeah.
Where do you buy them in from? Where do they come from? You don't grow them here, do you?
No. So that's right. I mean, there are two hatcheries in the UK that are disease-free. Mm-hmm. Scotland is unique in being a disease-free oyster country.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say unique, it really is unique.
Yes, you've said about France in the past, the issues France have had, and also Ireland, unfortunately,
exactly.
As well. Yeah.
So we are adamant that we only take seed from disease-free hatcheries.
Yeah.
It's a bit limiting because there are only a couple in the UK, one in Guernsey and one in Cumbria. So that's the choice, and we tend to take from both at times. They're more expensive because they have a lower turnover than the big French companies, and the same with the Irish, but that's the way we want to deal.
It's an insurance policy. You can't risk a crop dying.
Yeah.
Because the tales you've told me of the French crops dying,
absolutely,
a beach just reeking. And
it's scary and
awful thing.
I mean, it's not to say that it can't happen here, but we're trying to minimise that by ensuring that the stock that we take is disease-free. So that's where they come, and they come at 5mm in size.
It's not even a fingernail.
No, much smaller than that. And now Gordon, my son, puts them on the long lines in the outer part of the loch to start them off. Yeah. And they do really well out there.
This is beautiful. They're like lanterns, Chinese lanterns, aren't they? This balloon
lantern cages.
Yeah, and they tumble. He was saying. I was talking to Gordy on Twitter the other night about it, because Gordy's Twitter presence is beautiful. He's always showing lovely photos of what's going on.
That's right.
And the lantern nets, I'm always fascinated because we can see when he's out putting the lines out at the start of the season. If we're in our bedroom, like, where's Gordy doing? But they're these lovely Chinese lanterns that as the sea goes through them, it tumbles them in a beautiful way, so that their shells get this roundedness that's really...
They're good quality and lovely colour, good shape.
They're really beautiful.
It's worked out well. I mean, I was very sceptical at the start.
This is so Gordy, the next generation, trying out new
exactly.
things.
I wondered whether it would work, but it has worked. And so he's progressed the business considerably, because in the early days we would buy it, as I said, at 10 grams, which is 1 year on. Yeah. And there's a cost in buying them at 10 grams. There's also a supply problem in buying them at that size, because not everybody has 10 gram oysters. So 1 year you get them, another year you couldn't get them. So this gives us a security of year in, year out, knowing that you buy 5mm spat from a hatchery, and into the sea, and by the end of October, you've got them up to, anything up to 3, 4, 5 grams.
That's where the photos were from Gordy over the weekend there, and it was just fab. So once they've gone from the lantern, the long lines, they go on to trestles.
Yep.
And what's the function of a kind of trestle system? How does that work?
So the trestle system is intertidal, and that, in other words, you can walk around it when the tide goes out. I mean, from ease of handling, it's great. You can get your tractor and trailer around it. Yeah. You also to have kept the oysters out in lantern nets or anything else in the sea permanently, we believe softens the oysters too much. They become because they never get hardened off in the air. They become very soft. They're almost like clams. They'll open and shut like a clam with very soft shell if you leave them too long. I mean, others may disagree with that, but that's how we believe it. So after a whole summer's growth, we like to get them onto a trestle where they start to get exposed there. They toughen up. They become. You need to get them tougher and hardier for the ultimate time when they're going to travel and be up the shore for a longer period. It also means that they don't get barnacle growth or anything else going on, which you get in the more exposed sea areas. It's much cleaner down there because of the fresh water that's going past the oyster beach.
It's also important to say as well that these aren't the native oysters that you grow.
No, these aren't. There are native oysters down there, which funnily enough, are improving because we're providing the underneath. They like the underneath of the trestles to hang on to.
Lovely, oh gosh.
So frequently we're finding all these natives underneath the bags, which we just peel off and put on the seabed. Just
briefly on the Pacific oyster as well. Why? We've talked about this before, I know, but why would you choose the Pacific oyster for this part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because you'd think the native oyster would be the natural thing to do, but the natives are really fussy.
Yeah. This is Scotland in general.
Yeah, they like to be on their own. They don't like to be trapped in bags. They grow quite well when they're small, but the minute they look like they're reaching maturity, they go and die on you. They don't like the cold. If they're up the shore too long and it's frosty, they'll die. They don't like the heat. You can't touch them when they're spatting because they're quite vulnerable then. They're just a bit of a nightmare, and they take 5 to 7 years to grow to become a mature oyster. Yeah. The Pacific oyster, which is grown all around the world, slightly different types of Pacific oyster, but generally roughly the same. Grown right around the world, hardy. I mean, it isn't disease resistant because we know there's diseases, but they are generally fast growing. So in Scotland we can get them to marketable size within 3 years.
Fantastic.
In some countries they can get them to marketable size within 1 year.
Really? I didn't know.
In warm countries.
But then
Australia.
You get the risk of spatting though with that.
You do get the risk of spatting, exactly, and you also get much higher risk of death, mortalities and diseases.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a bit like the trees in Scotland. They're a bit slow growing, but they're quality.
They're hardy, yeah.
So the native. There's a big push at the moment on native restoration, and that's worth thinking about for places like Alva, I think.
I had my stag night on Alva and took one of my best friends is a chef and a hotel critic, and we all traipsed across with Colin Morrison over to the south side of Alva, and we had scallops, having scallops, and it was fantastic, really, really nice. And Colin found a native oyster, a real big one. And Adrian, my friend, who loves fine food and fine living, tried it. And he said he'd never had a better oyster in his whole life. Yeah. It was one of the most extraordinary oysters he's ever had.
Well, I think that we talked about this earlier. I think that the native oysters around Alva are quite unique, and I think it could probably, with the right work done on it and the right restoration techniques, reintroducing, using the stock that's there, but producing them in a hatchery condition, and then reintroducing the small ones. I think it could be something that could actually provide at least a part-time living for somebody over a very specific period.
A
window of time with a license and a catching quantity, like a quota. And that could be sustainable for the future. And native oysters fetch a very big price because they're in much demand. So it's maybe something for the Alva community to think about in the future. I seem to have, from those early days of struggling away in a wee open boat and totally unsuitable clothing, I can remember. I can remember feeling very cold at times in the open launch. A boat actually, incidentally, built in Tiree. She was called Tiree Maid, and built by a family out there who still got pictures of them building 3 of these boats, and it was a fantastic boat. Really good. I wish I had that boat yet. She was such a good boat, sea boat.
You speak very fondly of Gangwarely though as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the boat we had the longest, and Alistair MacLean had her before us, and he did well in her, we did well in her, and she's still doing well today. She's now back where she came from, around about the Ballachulish area. I think that she was built in the 70s up in Orkney. Fiberglass boat, of course.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
But very, very, very strong wee boats. Both Alistair and ourselves have always spoken so highly of the Gangwarely. And he's had a lot of boats over his time. A lot of good boats over his time too, but I think he's probably got a soft spot for the Gangwarely too. There's many a creel going over the side of that boat. The last few years we concentrated on the oysters, and now George is out of that, well and truly out of that, and Gordon, my son, now is in charge of the oysters, and obviously I still keep an interest in things, but
and Kenny, your other son, is in fishing.
And Kenny's got his own boat and does very well indeed in the fishing. So the second generation fisherman who's successful.
Yeah. And Christy's just about to have a baby in Spain.
The odd one out is in Spain, but the rest of them are here, which is, when you go back to those early days, could you ever have imagined any of this? But then I suppose that's the interesting stories about people's lives, isn't it? How these odd circles come round, and who would ever have thought that your 2 sons would be next door to you, and one of them fishing and one doing the oysters. But yeah, I miss the fishing. I do miss the fishing, and I keep my hand in because I like to help where I can. I hope I do help where I can the fishing community by representing them. And the Mull Fishermen's Association, and trying to help them, because I know how difficult it is when you're fishing to do that. And it's a skill that I can have. I can communicate and I'm able to put pen to paper, so I can do that part on their behalf, and anything I can do that makes their lives better and easier, then I'm happy to do. So I keep my hand in that way, and of course doing that I'm well aware of everything that's going on, politically and fishing-wise, which of course I'm interested in. And so I suppose that's really the role I see myself in doing now more so is guiding and helping where I can do. And there's quite lots of things I've touched, and many of them not done that well on, and some of them survived, but we're here today, and that's the main thing.
That's the story of people. I think that's the story of people everywhere. Is you try things, you keep trying things, and you keep moving, you keep seeing what keeps going. And when you find something that sticks, it's very rarely that it's just that one thing you do. You build onto it and around it. It's crafting.
Exactly. And I mean, I have to say, I really do have to say, if it hadn't been for those early people like Big Ian MacDonald, who'd kind of took us under his wing, and wee Alistair MacLean, and all the fishermen actually. And if it hadn't been for them, we'd probably not have survived. So that's another reason why helping others, I think, is the right thing to do. And they were pretty tolerant when you think about it. These two lads who might be, I don't suppose they saw us at any time as competition, but they could just have ignored us completely. And they didn't do that, which is great.
Thank you very much to Nick Turnbull for his time there. A couple of things from the podcast. If you want to follow Isle of Mull Oysters on Twitter, you can do. You can just type Isle of Mull Oysters into Twitter, or you can look under @GTurnbull1, which is Gordon Turnbull's Twitter handle, and you'll find all sorts of stories and pictures there about the life of the oyster farm and how it changes and develops through the seasons. And it's a really lovely Twitter presence. If you want to see Nick, Gordy and Kenny in operation working, I suggest you have a look at YouTube and type in Mull Seafood Trail. You'll find a video that I made some time ago for them there. And thank you again to Gus Stewart for the aerial footage in that as well. I've just got back to Mull from Barra, and as I said at the start of the podcast, and I've been working there with Shona Thompson on the Made by the Sea project, which is using community archive footage and footage found about the communities in various different archives around the place to share that back with younger members of the community, to then encourage them to make their own footage in response to this, which will then be shown in the Screen Machine later on in the year. So that's a great project that's been funded by HIE Regional Screen Scotland, and it's an absolute delight to work on it, so I'm looking forward to doing more of that. This podcast has been sponsored by Island Bakery, and you can find their website at www.islandbakery.co.uk. The sponsorship from the bakery pays for the hosting and technical things on the website for the podcast. It takes a long time to put this podcast together. So if you wanted to donate, you're very welcome to. Just the price of a cup of coffee, wherever you would be fantastic. And you can do that. You can find details on what we do in the winter.wordpress.com. If you wanted to donate, you're more than welcome, as I say. But if not, don't worry at all. I'd much rather you listened than didn't. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.